good old budgeting. You've seen it in principles too. You've seen it in cost. It's not that difficult. Definition things to kind of get reintroduced to, I suppose, things you should definitely know. A master budget is going to be, kind of think of it like a big old 3-ring binder with every other budget stuck in it, right? It's the whole plan for all the whole activities of the company. Within it, they say you've got an operating budget, a financial budget, and a capital expenditures budget. Most books will just say operating and financial. We'll stick the capital expenditures one in the financial budget. So that those three, knowing those three is not that important, but the operating budget, that's where a big chunk of your test questions come from. Operating budgets are the budgeted income statement and everything leading up to it. However, your book stuck the budgeted income statement somewhere else. So there's a lot of inconsistencies across different texts, which stinks. But you're fine thinking of it as operating budget, everything leading up to the budgeted income statement. So it's essentially every line item on the income statement has kind of a budget with it. You've got the sales budget that predicts your sales. You got all the components of cost of goods sold. Once you have an idea of how many you're going to produce, you got to get a production budget. You got a materials budget. Then you got a labor budget. Then you got an overhead budget. Then you got a selling and administrative expense budget. Your test questions tend to come from these right here. Sales budget, production budget, materials budget. In my experience, that's where you get most of your test questions, as well as jumping down into the financial budgets, cash flow. That tends to be the hot spots right there. Something that's really important to take note of, that you already know, is that the budgeting process, your sales budget, everything flows from there. If you had a budget in an Excel spreadsheet and it was all formulas, if you change that sales number, it would flow through and affect everything on it, right? The sales budget number is very, very important. And it's done first. So you tend to see questions about that one way or the other. What's the most important step? What's the starting point? That kind of thing. So sales budget is the starting point. And it's, if you got a number crunching question on that, you'd love it, because all it is number of units you expect to sell times how much you expect to sell it for. Simple. You probably won't get so lucky as to have that question. Production budget. So that's how many units you need to produce, your manufacturing firm. I mean, you have to produce to not only meet sales, but also to have a certain level of inventory on hand. You don't want to have sales demand that you can't meet. So you always have this cushion of inventory, right? So your production budget is going to be unit sales, which comes directly from the sales budget, plus what's your target ending inventory, the problem will give you some idea of how to calculate that. You can't just do unit sales plus target ending inventory. You really are capturing what kind of change in inventory do I need to consider. So subtract out what you already have. Otherwise, you just keep adding and adding inventory each time, right? So unit sales plus whatever change in inventory level you need to meet whatever sales you expect is coming up later, right? That's your production budget. You've done it a bunch of times. So it's nice and easy. But what they really like to do is ask you a question about the materials budget. And the important thing to remember that people tend to forget is you need your production budget to do your materials budget, right? Your production budget is how many you have to produce to meet these sales. Your materials budget is how many materials you need to meet production. You're not getting materials to meet sales, you're getting materials to meet production needs, right? Units produced times whatever the material is that you're dealing with. It might be something like 1,000 units times 5 pounds of whatever this material is per unit. So you're kind of converting that to a material. Right? And then from there, all you're doing is the same thing you did up here, plus target ending inventory of materials minus beginning. You need a cushion of ending inventory on hand for materials too. That would be your materials purchased. You've done these a bunch in our classes, undergraduate. If you see a labor budget question or an overhead budget question, those are always easy. It's all things like, we produced 1,000 units. Variable overhead was $2 per unit. Fixed overhead was $50,000. What's your overhead? It just becomes a question of knowing how variable and fixed overhead or variable and fixed costs behave, right? Labor budget would be your workers work 1,000 hours, $10 an hour, and your salaried workers work 50,000. You know, it's just variable and fixed costs if they're asking you a budget question on any of those others. So they like sales, production, and materials. You got to work through those. And they also like the cash budget. And those questions, really all these, really become an exercise of just following directions. It's like, listen to what they're saying and do the work. You know, with the cash budget, they'll say, cash sales was $10,000. Credit sales was $100,000. We expect to collect 70% of that this month, 30% of it next month. And you just schedule it out. It's really quite easy. So they do like to throw a cash budget question in every now and then, but just read the question and apply your knowledge. There's nothing to learn there. It's kind of easy, right? And then there's just some definitions about types of budgets here that you never know could show up, but I'll leave that there for you to look at. So let's see. All right, production budget. The production budget question. What is the required production level given the following? So that just requires us to know, this is a little overly simple, but it's okay. We know our production budget is unit sales plus target ending inventory minus beginning inventory. Very important to know that. This one is really extremely easy, but that's okay. Projected sales, budgeted sales is another way to say that, of course. 1,000 units. Desired ending inventory, they want 100 units. Beginning inventory, 85. Prior year beginning inventory at the beginning of last year. I guess that's what they're trying to fool us with. That's neither here nor there. Beginning inventory this year is 85. So we want 1,000 units being sold. We want to produce enough to meet that. We want to have enough produced to have 100 units on hand, but we already got 85 from the beginning, so we just need to bump up our inventory by another 15 to meet our ending inventory limits, right? So all in all, we need 1,050 units. So they want to know what, so like I said, you know, all these questions and some of these others just really becomes an exercise of following their directions, applying what you know about how things work in accounting, and just answering the question, right? So it says their budget committee is preparing its master budget on the basis of the following projections. They are projecting 2.8 million of sales. They're projecting inventories to decrease by 70,000. They're expecting payables to decrease by 150,000. They think gross margin will be 40%. How much do they expect estimated cash disbursements to be? All right, now, let me say this. I do like this question because it's kind of neat and kind of fun. It could be a CPA question, but it's one of those kind of out there that I've seen similar type things, so it certainly could be. But yeah, this one's a little complex. So what do we know? We know that we need to figure out what they had to pay for inventories. And they have given us how much inventories decreased by, and they've given us how much accounts payables decreased by. And they told us, well, let's see how it all ties together.
I'm sure it does.
It does. So here's what I immediately know. I know that sales is $2.8 million. I know that we subtract cost of goods sold to get gross margin, also known as gross profit, and they tell me that gross margin is 40% of sales, which means cost of goods sold is the other 60% of sales. Right, so we can figure all that stuff out. So for cost of goods sold is 1,680,000. Gross margin is 1,120,000. Now, again, this is out there, more complex than typical. So don't get freaked out about this. And I do like it because it's kind of like a puzzle in a way. So we know cost of goods sold now, right? What is cost of goods sold? That is us decreasing our inventory off the books, right? Inventory is credited, cost of goods sold is debited. That's what we do, right? So we're getting a little bit of idea of what's going on with our inventory account with this. We make up some random beginning inventory number. I just went with 70,000 because it says inventories decreased by 70. So I just said, all right, I'm starting with 70 and I'm ending with 0, just so I can play with some numbers. So I'm making these up. This is just the way I do it. So I know that 1,680,000 was credited out of there to arrive to this. So now I can figure out what my purchases were of inventory, right? I'm plugging that in. So that means purchases 1,610,000 in this little example I'm drawing up for myself. All right. So now I can come over here to answer the question, and that's all based on accounts payable that we're paying cash for. Accounts payable decreased by 150. I just kind of set that as my beginning balance. Set 0 as my ending balance. All right. As I purchase inventory, I debit inventory. I'm over here pointing at the screen like you can see. I debit inventory. I credit accounts payable. All right. So if it went from a beginning of 150 down to 0, I can plug this debit here. To get an idea of how much of that I paid off. Now, how much do you need to worry about this problem? Not at all. The odds of you seeing something exactly like this is very, very slim. And pretty complex and a little problem to work through, but you never know what they'll throw at you. So the more of these types of things you can practice on reasoning through, the better. Right? You may not see anything like this ever again, but you reason through a really weird setup problem and you got there. So that's worth something, right? So I do like this problem, but is it useful for us? Not really. Forecasting. Important topics here. Maybe more so for the CMA exam than this, but also for CPA exam. So how do we forecast some things that end up on our budgets is the idea here. And a lot of times we'll use probabilities and expected values and things like that. The important content here is really begins here. But your correlation analysis, a little more important for CMA exam, but maybe some CPA questions too. And we know what correlation is, and regression and everything, but it's the strength of the relationship between variables, right? Dependent variables and independent variables. We've talked about that quite a bit. What we may not have talked about yet, though, is the correlation coefficient, which can be a range from -1 to 1, and how to interpret that. We may have, but I don't think we have. So, when you do your correlation analysis and you get your output, it'll range from -1 to 1. And that's denoted as R. -1 would be perfect negative correlation. One variable goes up, the other one goes down in an equal way. +1 will be a perfect positive correlation. If one goes up, the other goes up in the same way. 0 would be absolutely no correlation. So, between 0 and 1, you've got a positive correlation, but it's not perfectly positive, right? As one goes up, the other goes up less, but still goes up with it, right? R squared, which is called the coefficient of determination. That measures how good, it's goodness of fit. You got an equation that supposedly tells how one affects the other, how they're correlated. R squared tells you how strong that equation is for measuring what you expect to measure, right? It measures, it's like, okay, I'm seeing that the independent variable predicts the dependent variable in this way. R squared tells you how good your equation is at predicting that. And higher R squared is better. So in our academic research papers, we'll crunch all these fancy statistics, and that R squared becomes a really important number. We've got an equation, we've got our variables, we'll look at the statistical significance of each of those variables, and we'll look at the R squared of our equation to see how strong that is. So that becomes a really important thing. So R squared is goodness of fit. And then there's some calculations on probabilities and things that are kind of fun to do, and you can often see questions on those as well. I like this question. This is a good question. Like I said, this is something you more likely to see on a CMA exam, but very well could see it on a CPA exam. They're fun to do. So under frost-free conditions, frost-free conditions, this company expects a strawberry crop to have a $60,000 market value. An unprotected crop subject to frost has an expected market value of $40,000. If Cal protects the strawberries against frost, then the market value of the crop is still expected to be $60,000 under frost-free conditions, and $90,000 if there is a frost. All right, a lot of information here. What must the probability of a frost for cow? What must be the probability of a frost for cow to be indifferent to spending $10,000 for frost protection? All right, a lot of numbers, kind of a complex situation, but reading that, you can see how this could be useful in real life, right? It's like, okay, I have an opportunity to protect my crop against this insurance. Is it worth it? What do I think is going to happen? What's it worth if it does? Blah, blah, blah. So let's see. So the question is, what must the probability of a frost be for them to be indifferent to spending $10,000 for frost protection? So protecting the crops if frost happens would be worth $50,000, right? Right, 90,000 protected minus 40,000 unprotected. That's what it's worth if they protect the crop if frost happens. That's what they get out of that, right? Now you have to pay $10,000 for this thing that won't necessarily happen, right? There was let's say there was a 100% chance of frost happening. This would absolutely be worth 50,000, right? 50,000 times 100% chance that it would happen, right? If there was a 50-50 chance, this would be worth $25,000, right? 50,000 times 25%. I'm sorry, 50%. So that reasoning, taking that similar reasoning, what are they willing to pay $10,000 for? What percent chance of this happening would make this worth $10,000, right? So 50,000 is what they stand to gain. They would be willing to pay $10,000 for that if there was a 20% chance that this would happen. That's what would make that worth $10,000. So there you go. Makes sense. So we are trying to decide what it's worth for us to protect the crops, right? So it says if there's a frost, it's worth 90,000. If we protect it, right? If there's not a frost, if there's a frost and it's unprotected, there we go. It would be 40,000 is what we can get out of it. So we stand to gain 50,000 by protecting. So that's the whole idea. So 40,000 if we say, who cares, let's roll the dice. 90,000 if we say, yeah, let's protect this thing in the frost. So it all comes down to how certain do we think the frost is going to happen. So, if we're 100% sure, then that would be worth 50,000 to us to protect it. If we're 50-50, we would be willing to pay 25,000 for it. What are we willing to pay 10,000 for? A 20% chance. How do we figure out that chance? I guess we have to rely on the weather folks on that. But yeah. Number 2 is just the definition. Good, because then we have 11 minutes left. Using regression analysis, which measure indicates the extent to which a change in the IV explains the change in the DV. The extent to which it all explains everything is R squared, right? So two is number 3. We've done these before in other sections. It's just the whole equation saying which is what. So here they're asking which of the following is correct. A is the total fixed cost, so I think we're all very comfortable with that, right? Well, if you see that on a test, rewrite it as y equals mx plus b, and go from there. Because I'm the same way. Well, that's what I'm saying. Why change what was? Because that's exactly how I learned it. So yeah, I rewrite it as that and then go from there. Same again. Which of these is the independent variable? We've done this from other sections. So number 4, the independent variable is. So yeah, y equals mx plus b. So yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah, better change things and other.
They want to make it as extremely confusing as possible.
Number say when it's not this plus this, where it's A plus instead of this plus.
It's just better to rewrite it.
Yeah.
It really is. This one is interesting. The regression analysis results for ABC company are shown as y equals 90x plus 45. So you can rewrite that however you want. The standard error is 30. You don't even know what that is or care. And the coefficient of determination, R squared, is 0.81. The budget calls for production of 100 units. What is their estimate of the total cost? So they gave us a whole bunch of junk we don't need. All we have to do is plug into that formula. So don't let too much information screw with your head. Sometimes they're just that easy. And remember, this one, just another definition. Coefficient of determination, another way of saying that is goodness of fit. And that's important terminology to know. It's very commonly used. The whole idea of goodness of fit. All right. So that wraps up the rest of that. Fairly easy stuff to end. All right. Enterprise risk management. So there's about, you're going to find that I don't have much in the way of notes on this, which I guess is a good thing. Things I highlighted are kind of consistent among the other test preps. So let's see what we got. I don't like this kind of thing either. I don't like having to deal with this kind of thing in my own job. We're doing accreditation stuff, and we have to sit in front of accreditation committees and answer questions like, how do you feel that this specific thing aligns with your vision? And I'm not good at answering questions like that because I don't think about it that way. I just look at something, I don't think, hey, this will be a good thing, and I do it. I don't think, and I'm not good at doing that, and I'm not good at talking about it. So I'll hope that someone else answers that question instead of me when the committee asks it. And then I find that whoever does didn't really have a better way of saying it either. But they ramble through it better than I could have done, certainly.
I don't understand the purpose behind having all of that a lot. I guess it's not like, okay, yeah, it's good to have company value, company mission statement, all that. But is it really necessary to tie everything back into it? I mean, I guess, but why?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's important for a lot of reasons, you know. But I'm with you.
I guess I understand what you're saying. I was thinking something good, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I don't really worry about how it necessarily pertains to X, Y, Z part of it.
Right. But does everybody?
You have to look at it in a political way.
Does everybody think correctly about things like you and I do?
No problem.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
You have to look at it like in like political way, like
Yeah.
they have to look at it,
Right.
evaluate it.
You need this in writing. You need this structure that needs to guide everything. It needs to be all thought through and formulated instead of just haphazardly everybody doing what they think is a good idea. You know?
I think I've just dealt with it so many years for the ambassadors that I'm like, yeah.
So, you know, theoretically, everything I do, I should be like, how does this fit into the College of Business's strategic plan?
When it comes to syllabus.
Yeah, and we
That's
have to
why
tie
I
all our
think that's
syllabi.
what makes it.
We have to formulate learning goals that tie into the strategic plan and all of that. And, you know, the College of Business has a mission, a vision statement, and strategic goals. They're all part of the strategic plan. I'm good at. I'm glad other people are good at putting that kind of thing.
So you have to work on planning all that out.
Yes, yeah, we have to do all this and we have to map everything out. And, you know, when it's all over and done with, it's a very good thing. I really hate it. I really don't like it.
I think mostly what I hate is the wording of it. I would just rather it be simple,
Yeah.
easier to understand and comprehend.
Yeah.
Or vague or just big words that remove a lot of time with that kind of stuff.
But, you know, I've been placed in charge of making the accounting department do what it needs to do. And, you know, the other chairs are in charge of doing what their department needs to do. And, you know, we can't just all go off and do our own thing. We need to be able to tie it all into some broader thing that's there. But that, again, it goes back to in my mind, I know the things I'm doing does tie back somehow to some of that. You know what I'm saying? I just am not good at it.
Let me know if you need help, that's fine with me.
You like it. Okay.
Yeah.
You and I are going. I'm glad you said that because I've
Because I've
got
had to go through the goals and all that stuff like 3 times by now.
I've got to rewrite some of the undergrad goals and I need to reformulate a MAC goal too. So you're going to be working in the dean's
I
office.
am.
All right.
Like,
You and I are going to collaborate.
To get approved.
I'm excited about that. That's good. Okay, enterprise risk management, ERM, they'll often write it. It's very broad, very broad. It's the culture of the company, of the firm, or whatever. It is their capabilities. It is their practices. It's all of these things by which they manage risks to ultimately create value and then preserve value once it's there, you know, that kind of thing. Realize value. So, you know, culture, it's their core values. You know, it's how everybody in the group, all the department chairs, all the faculty, how do they collectively think as a group within their organization? We all need to be on the same page. Control environment would certainly, that would be a parallel for sure. Yep. Yes, that culture, absolutely. So it's the culture, it's the capabilities, right? What is their competitive advantage? What are they good at? What makes them stick out? And then the practices that, so, it includes a bunch of things. Creating an appropriate culture, identifying risk, managing risk, a lot broader than internal control. It considers all these things like risk appetite, which kind of drives people crazy, trying to learn about, and considers their strategies and things like that. All right, risk, we know what it is, but can we put it into words? And maybe it's an uncertain event that will have some kind of impact on whether we can achieve our goals. And then they go so far as to drill down into a negative versus a positive risk, which I don't find to be that important, but I thought it was kind of interesting. A negative risk is a bad thing, a failure, a setback. Your system doesn't work, can't keep track of sales, can't keep track of inventory, something like that. Positive risk is an opportunity. Servers fail because demand for your product is so high. I thought that was not that important, but kind of interesting.
Like 2 years ago, when they released like 5 and 6, they have these, their server died like after like a few minutes after they opened the sale.
Yeah.
There's so many people just totally the same.
Yeah. So it's like, there's a risk that this happens, but if it does, we're going to be happy.
Right.
We'll fix it and be so much happy. Yeah, exactly. So a well-designed ERM system would provide us with reasonable expectation, not a guarantee, always important, of achieving goals. An important thing that pops up a lot is in a lot of aspects of a lot of things is integrated is always a good thing instead of isolated. So, these initiatives, the more they're integrated throughout the organization, the better than if they're just isolated. If we had accounting department initiatives that were our own thing without any regard to the overall college of business, and then the finance department was doing something that, this wouldn't be as effective as, we actually do things, right? So, with ERM practices, very broad things, we want some expectation that we can achieve our objectives. There's risks involved. We need to manage those. We need to manage the amount of risk that we're willing to accept while pursuing the ultimate goal of creating value, right? And as we know, risk is directly related to our expected return. Theoretically, the more risk we assume, the higher our returns will be. So part of this whole system is us figuring out how much risk we're willing to accept. What is our risk appetite? So risk appetite is a definition that we want to be aware of for sure. And it's simply the type of risk and the amount of risk that we're willing to accept in pursuing the value, right? It's our willingness to assume risk. It's a range, right? It's kind of a broad range, and it helps guide us on what to pursue and what not to pursue. And it varies between products and varies between business units and varies over time. It needs to be flexible and it can adapt to different changes and things like that. It's just a very broad idea. What is the company's risk appetite? We were talking mission and vision and all that. It's always fuzzy. What's the difference between a mission and a vision? It's very much the same. But, mission is kind of a why. Why do we exist? And what are we trying to accomplish? It's an objective. It's a why. A vision is what do we aspire to achieve over time? It's more of a strategy. It's more of a what. Again, I don't feel like these are super important CBA type questions, maybe, but it's good to reason through it and think about it.
We've got a few more sections.
I didn't find any good questions from any of these. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So what's important? Definitely reasonable expectation, not a guarantee. That's always important. What is the definition? That's definitely important. Idea of integrated system is always a good thing. Anything I have listed, I feel like is important enough to list. Anything I highlight in green, I feel like you better know this. Kind of what I do. Yeah. All right. So moving on. Yeah, the questions were really easy for this section. Just because I'm skipping them doesn't mean they weren't good. It just means, those were too easy, right? There's a really easy question about mission and vision and values. There's one that emphasizes that we want greater integration in our ERM system. It's really easy stuff. Not bad things, just kind of easy. Okay, I didn't take any notes on this one. There are 5 components in COSO's ERM framework. I wouldn't say this is as important as those other 5, but I would probably take note of them. For sure, they're kind of a lot of the same things as the 5 internal control ones that we did.
Do you have a way to remember these?
Just, a way to
Let's see. Okay.
So information and communication and reporting all fall under one.
Yes. All right. I didn't create this. GoPro. I learned a new word. There's a backronym. Have y'all ever heard this term? So there's an acronym and a backronym. A backronym is like an acronym, except you take a word that already exists and make it into something. Like scuba is an acronym. That word was created by doing that. But a backronym is, let's see.
Like Wi-Fi.
Is that a backronym?
Wireless fidelity.
That's an acronym, isn't it? You created a new word.
Originally, it was just Wi-Fi. They just created the word. And then later, people added wireless fidelity to it.
Okay, didn't know that. Well, there you go. That is a backronym. Yeah. There you go. Yeah, has nothing to do with anything we're doing here, but it's okay. Fun fact.
I love it. I like
Fun facts.
learning stuff like that.
Now, how important is it to remember these 5? I don't know. It's up to you. I feel like if I was getting in to do BEC tests, I'd probably take the internal control ones, memorize those, and forget these. That's probably what I would do. But not saying that'd be the right thing to do. I'm just saying I don't know if I can split up in my head each of the 5 and keep them straight. So I would just stick with the first 5 and hope for the best on these, maybe. But they're kind of the same too. Governance and culture certainly ties into control environment from the other one. Same thing, different word for it. Information, communication, and reporting certainly ties into
So would review and revision tied to risk?
Review and revision would be monitoring.
That's it.
Yeah. You know, these would kind of be risk assessment and performance,
I got you.
not performance.
Activity.
Yeah. Existing control, yeah, the existing control activity. So yeah, they kind of tie in. But, yeah.
Yeah, I have another acronym remember it, so it's easy for me to keep straight.
Yeah.
But yeah, same old things, you know, governance and culture, that's the whole, you know, on the top. Culture, values. Strategy and objective setting is strategies and objectives, risk appetite, kind of thing. Performance, all these things for all these. Yeah. Questions were not very useful for us to go through. So each of these sections drills into each of those things, governance and culture. There's no new real new information here. The directors is the primary bulbs. We already mentioned all of this. Board independent of management. There's really nothing new here. Yeah. So I grabbed the one, according to the COSO ERM framework, which of the following is least likely to impede the independence of a board member? This one was kind of tough. This is one where it's like, well, you don't know what you don't know type thing. But yeah, being on, so, okay, we're looking for the best thing is what we're looking for. So the first one, you know, says Jane was a partner at an accounting firm that conducted the organization's financial statement audit 5 years ago. There's no existing business or contractual relationship with the entity currently. We know that's fine. So we know that's the answer, right? The thing that bugged me was, we're like, well, what about that? But they do make a point that someone on the board that long would be a potential independence problem.
Yeah. If you have so many connections with people.
Right.
They're just gonna tell you what they want.
Yeah. That was one of those things I didn't really think about or know till I read this problem. Like, okay, well, now I know. Didn't know before, now I do. So, okay, there's some stuff here worth noting for sure. So, and it's not that difficult really. You know, we already mentioned risk appetite before. So that's kind of an overall decision of risk appetite that's made. And then you kind of go from there and assess your risk capacity and develop a whole risk profile. So risk capacity, very descriptive term, is the maximum amount of risk they can absorb. Risk appetite we've already defined, but here it is again. And then they make some points that could possibly show up in a conceptual type question. You know, your overall risk appetite obviously wouldn't be more than your risk capacity. That's kind of an upper limit is your risk capacity, right? So nothing should be more than that. And you know, you can state this using numbers, or you can state it using words. Risk appetite, that is. There's some question, I don't know if it was here or somewhere else, that talked about a goal of decreasing risk appetite. That's not a goal. It sounds like it might be a goal. It's like, oh, we need to try to figure out a way to decrease our risk appetite. But no, that's something that you're just, all right, what's our risk appetite here? You know, you don't have a goal to decrease that. Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh.
Same thing. I mean, we talk about
The words you mean?
I mean, it's the maximum that they're willing to accept, and risk capacity is the maximum that can absorb. Kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's hard to keep them straight.
And in the question, I think there was a question about this, to know
kind of think of it as like diminishing level of return. Like how something, you want something, but then once you have so much of it, then like your appetite, that's like the diminishing level. I don't know.
I don't know. I think like the word appetite. I'm like, I have a pretty good appetite for sushi, and I can eat a big old platter of sushi.
And that's maximum that we're gonna eat.
No, a big old platter is not a maximum.
Yeah.
That's just my appetite. I'm like, hey, pile it on. I can do it. Now, I could say, you know what?
But the maximum can be
30 pieces is my capacity. I can't,
It's kind of like think about work. You can potentially work 24 hours a day. You don't not want to work. That was stupid. I apologize. But I regress. But let's say you can work 12 hours a day. You don't want to work 8.
Yeah.
So you have the capacity to work 12 hours.
Yeah.
But you don't really want to. So your appetite will be 8. Similar to what he said.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, my appetite's, maybe, and it'd probably be a range, like, okay, my appetite's, 6 to 12 hours or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say no number.
Oh,
But my capacity might be 15 hours, but after 15, I'm going to be dead on my feet and I can't work, But yeah, it is a little fuzzy. So I pulled these examples in. Again, I forget where I pulled these in. It may have been our very actual book. I may have pulled it somewhere else. But, a medical supply company might have a low risk appetite regarding safety and compliance. They're not willing to accept a whole lot of risk regarding safety and compliance. They might have a higher risk appetite for strategic and operations objectives. They're willing to take more risk there. They have a bigger appetite. They're just speaking broadly, strategizing and stuff. Like, well, what's your appetite regarding safety? Oh, low. Yeah. What's your capacity? 0. So, but university might want to expand offerings and might have a moderate risk appetite related to that. They will not accept programs that present a risk to the mission and vision. That would be their risk ceiling or capacity. Technology company might want to invest at least 25% of its budget in technology innovation. That would be their risk floor. So, there you go. Risk tolerance. And this gets a little too much, really. The risk tolerance would be the boundaries of acceptable variation in which they can perform related business objectives. So this is more focused and related to implementing strategy and variation for plans and stuff. And this would be stated in numbers instead of the broad, I got a high risk appetite. This is more something like this. So example of risk tolerance would be, I have a target time of 40 minutes. My tolerance is somewhere between 30 to 50. Put examples there, but it's just terminology. You go through all this craziness, and then you look at your questions, and they gave us 3. None of which I made a note of. They were all very vague.